Max and Ruby once had a love story that seemed straight out of a fairy tale, passionate, vibrant, and full of promise. But beneath the surface, cracks began to form, and their perfect image started to crumble. In just 2 years, their relationship turned into a labyrinth of mistrust and conflict. Ruby's sudden trips and unspoken secrets leave Max questioning everything he thought he knew. As the inconsistencies in her stories pile up, Max finds himself on a desperate quest for the truth. What's hiding behind Ruby's silence? Are you ready to find out how it all ends? My dear friend, be sure to subscribe to my channel if this is your first time here, and give your royal like to this video. Max and Ruby were once the couple everyone envied. Their relationship seemed to embody a perfect harmony of youthful excitement and thrilling experiences. They first crossed paths at a summer barbecue 2 years ago, where Max's calm and steady presence perfectly complemented Ruby's vivacious and dynamic personality, sparking an instant connection. Within a year of that fateful meeting, they were married, overflowing with hopes and dreams for the life they would build together. But now, just 18 months into their marriage, their once strong bond was beginning to show signs of strain. Max, a naturally kind and considerate man, poured himself into his demanding job at a local accounting firm. Despite his busy schedule, he never stopped making an effort to keep their love alive, whether through heartfelt notes left on the fridge or quiet evenings planned just for the two of them. These thoughtful gestures had once brought a radiant smile to Ruby's face. Recently, though, nothing seemed to brighten her mood. Ruby, with her spirited and impetuous nature, began picking fights over issues that left Max confused and hurt. One evening, as they were preparing dinner, she abruptly exclaimed, "You don't even follow me on social media, Max. It's like you don't care about me anymore." Max sighed, his voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. "Ruby, I'm here with you every single day. Isn't that what matters most?" But Ruby wasn't ready to let it drop. "If you really loved me, you'd care about everything I share. Why don't you want to be involved in my life?" Another time, it was about his friendships. When Max mentioned plans to play golf on Saturday with some friends, Ruby's irritation boiled over. "You promised we'd spend time together, but I guess your friends are more important to you," she said sharply. Max tried to explain that maintaining friendships was a normal part of life, but his reasoning only seemed to inflame her anger. Even small missteps, like forgetting to take out the trash, could spark a confrontation. "You're doing it just to get under my skin," she accused. The harshest moment came when she questioned his loyalty. "Are you cheating on me, Max? Is that why you've been so distant?" The accusation hit Max like a blow. It was completely unfounded, and the sheer absurdity of it left him emotionally drained. He suggested solutions, a weekend trip together, spending more quality time as a couple, even seeking therapy. But Ruby dismissed these ideas with a nonchalant, "Everything's fine," only for the cycle of arguments to resume shortly after. When the tension became unbearable, Ruby would storm out of the house, either to visit her sister or meet up with friends. Alone in the quiet, Max was left to reflect on how their once vibrant love had disintegrated into a series of exhausting conflicts. The frequency of their arguments revealed a pattern that Max felt powerless to break, and each time Ruby uttered the dreaded word divorce, it cut him deeply. "Maybe we're just not meant to be," she said through tears one night, leaving Max questioning whether she truly meant it. Yet, by the next morning, Ruby would act as though nothing had happened, and they'd fall back into their strained semblance of normalcy. Max, ever patient, was reaching his limit. He loved Ruby with all his heart and wanted to save their marriage, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was the only one truly trying. One evening, an argument flared over something as trivial as a loose cabinet hinge Max had neglected to fix. To Ruby, it symbolized something much larger. "You never listened to me, Max," she cried, her frustration spilling over. Seated on the couch, Max pressed his fingers to his temples, struggling to remain composed. "Ruby, it's not that I don't listen. I've just had a lot on my plate this week. I'll take care of it tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" she shot back, pacing the room. "That's always your excuse. Maybe I'm done waiting for tomorrow. Maybe I'm done with this marriage." Max stood, his tone firmer than usual. Ruby, stop. This isn't about the cabinet. You're upset, but you're not even giving me a chance to make things right. The word divorce loomed in the air, unspoken but tangible, like a storm threatening to erupt. Max hated how often it was weaponized in their arguments. Taking a steadying breath, he tried once again to reach her. I love you, Ruby, but we can't keep living like this. We need to figure out what's going wrong. For a moment, Ruby's fiery resolve seemed to waver. Her shoulders slumped and she avoided his gaze. Do you think therapy could help? She asked tentatively, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I do, Max replied, his tone gentle but firm. A therapist could help us communicate better and understand each other. I want to fix this, Ruby. I want us to work. She bit her lip, torn. Maybe you're right, she murmured. After a pause, she added softly, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. Max exhaled slowly, hiding his frustration. Then what are you ready for? He asked, his voice weary but hopeful. Ruby's expression brightened suddenly, as though struck by inspiration. I need a break, she said, her tone lifting. A chance to reset. Viviana and Bonnie have been planning a girls' trip to Europe. Maybe I could join them, take some time to think. Max blinked, taken aback. A trip to Europe? Are you serious? Why not? She replied, her determination growing. I've always wanted to see Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. This could be exactly what I need. The idea unsettled Max. It wasn't the kind of break he had envisioned, but if it could help, he didn't want to stand in her way. How long would you be gone? He asked carefully. Just 12 days, she answered quickly, as if to ease his concerns. It's not that long, right? I'll keep in touch the whole time, I promise. Max frowned, still uneasy. You really think this will help? Ruby nodded, though her confidence seemed fragile. I do. I think it'll give us both some breathing room, a chance to think without all this tension. Though the prospect worried him, Max agreed. If Ruby believed the trip could help, he felt he had to support her, for the sake of their marriage. In the days leading up to her departure, Ruby was consumed with planning, her excitement unmistakable. She spent hours poring over itineraries and talking with her friends about must-see sites. Meanwhile, Max tried to be supportive, even as a gnawing worry took root in his mind. On the morning of her flight, he offered to drive her to the airport, but she declined. She avoided meeting my eyes, her tone unwavering but detached. I need to do this by myself, she explained. It's not that I don't want you around, Max. I just need room to breathe. Her words struck a nerve, but I forced a slow nod. All right, I replied, pushing past the sting of rejection that clung to my throat. Standing in the doorway, suitcase in hand, Ruby turned back to offer a smile that was oddly light-hearted, almost carefree. This is for the best, for both of us, she said with a confidence I couldn't share. You'll see. I managed a faint smile, swallowing the growing knot of doubt in my chest. I hope you're right, I said quietly. Promise me you'll stay in touch? I asked. Of course, she replied, leaning in to plant a quick kiss on my cheek. Moments later, she was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt unfamiliar and oppressive. I lingered by the window, watching as her car disappeared down the street, my chest heavy with an ache I tried to ignore. 12 days, I muttered to myself. It's just 12 days. I repeated the words like a mantra, trying to convince myself that everything would be fine. For the first 2 days, Ruby replied to my messages, but her responses were brief and devoid of warmth. When I asked how her trip was going, her answers felt distant. It's fine or busy, lots happening, she would say without elaborating. There was no spark, no colorful details. Her replies felt more like chores than attempts to connect. By the 3rd day, the silence grew louder. My texts went unanswered, and my calls went straight to voicemail. I told myself she was probably overwhelmed, caught up in the whirlwind of travel. But by the 5th day, that excuse felt hollow. A heavy sense of dread settled over me. Looking for a distraction, I turned to social media, hoping for glimpses of her journey. Ruby had posted a few photos, scenic spots, cozy cafes, charming streets. The images were lovely but felt oddly impersonal. There were no selfies, no playful group photos with Viviana or Bonnie. It seemed unusual, but I told myself maybe she was savoring the experience instead of documenting it. Still, my curiosity wouldn't let go. I checked Viviana's and Bonnie's profiles for clues. Viviana, who usually posted constantly, had been uncharacteristically quiet. Bonnie, however, had shared more. One of her photos froze me in place, a vibrant piazza at sunset, with Bonnie and Viviana smiling for the camera. In the corner, barely noticeable, were two unmistakably masculine hands. A sick feeling churned in my stomach. I tried to dismiss it. Meeting new people on a trip was perfectly normal, especially abroad. But the image lingered in my mind, and Ruby's continued silence only deepened my unease. Determined to understand, I scrolled through more of Bonnie's posts. Eventually, I found a video she'd uploaded. My heart raced as I hit play. The unsteady footage showed a lively restaurant, tables full of people. The camera panned, revealing Bonnie, Viviana, and Ruby sitting together, alongside three men. Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the background. My breath caught when I saw Ruby. Even in the blurry video, I recognized her immediately. She was leaning in toward a tall man with dark hair, her expression bright with laughter. Viviana and Bonnie looked equally at ease, paired with the other two men. Before I could think, the video vanished. Bonnie had deleted it. My hands trembled as I hurried to save a screenshot from my gallery. I stared at it for what felt like hours. It wasn't conclusive, but it was enough to make my suspicions undeniable. Ruby hadn't gone on a simple girls' trip. There was more to this story, and her silence said it all. By the 8th day, I stopped trying to reach her. Each unanswered message and ignored call felt like a wound reopening. I couldn't bear the humiliation anymore. Instead, I turned inward, facing a harsh truth. Our relationship was falling apart. Whatever Ruby was doing, wherever she was, she had no interest in mending what had broken between us. I began preparing myself for the inevitable. Though I still loved her, I couldn't ignore the deceit, the distance, or the secrets. I practiced what I'd say when she returned. I didn't want an argument. I wanted clarity. I needed the truth, no matter how painful. Then something unexpected happened. On the 9th day, Ruby's social media burst back to life. Her feed filled with dazzling photos of iconic landmarks and scenic cities. The posts were vibrant and polished, yet something felt off. Viviana and Bonnie had gone completely quiet. There were no group pictures, no playful comments. It was as though Ruby had suddenly started traveling alone. My instincts told me something wasn't right. Her sudden activity seemed more like an effort to cover her tracks than genuine enthusiasm. Her continued silence toward me only confirmed my doubts. What was she hiding? Alone in the emptiness of our home, I stared at my phone, anger and heartbreak warring within me. I had resisted involving anyone else in our private struggles, but by the 10th day I couldn't hold back. Swallowing my pride, I called Viviana. It took 3 tries before she answered. My heart pounded as I heard her voice. "Hello?" she said, her tone uneasy and guarded. I forced myself to sound casual. "Hi, Viviana, it's Max. I hope I'm not disturbing you." There was a pause, longer than expected. "Oh, Max. No, it's okay," she finally said. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm fine," I lied, gripping the phone. I haven't heard much from Ruby lately. I thought maybe you could tell me how the trip is going." Viviana hesitated, her voice carefully measured. "Oh, everything's fine. You know how trips are. Lots to do. Ruby's probably just busy with sightseeing and hasn't had time to check in." I didn't buy it. "She hasn't replied in days, Viviana. Are you sure everything's okay?" A nervous laugh crackled through the line. Yeah, everything's fine." "Everything's fine, really. Just a few hiccups. Almost got mugged in Italy, and the weather's been awful, especially in Germany. It's freezing, Max. Keeping in touch has been tricky with the time zones." Max's frown deepened. Something about her rushed tone seemed off, as though she was trying to justify too much. Then, faintly, he caught unfamiliar sounds in the background, voices speaking English, the whir of a copier, and the distinct beep of a microwave. It didn't fit the chaos of a bustling European city. Germany? Max questioned. That's quite a distance from Paris. Yeah, Viviana replied, her tone tightening. We've been on the move a lot. It's been hectic. Look, Max, I have to go now. We'll catch up properly when I'm back, okay? Before he could say anything more, the line disconnected. Max stared at his phone, a gnawing unease giving way to a chilling realization. Viviana wasn't in Europe. The office sounds, her cryptic replies, everything pointed to one conclusion. She was already home. Restless and unable to shake his doubts, Max grabbed his keys and drove to Viviana's house. Parking a few houses away, he waited. Hours dragged by as he watched the quiet street, tension mounting. Finally, as the evening light turned golden, her car pulled into the driveway. Max slouched in his seat, his stomach sinking as he watched her step out. She looked casual, her hair tied back, holding a takeout bag. She seemed relaxed, but weary, not the look of someone who'd just returned from an international trip. As she disappeared into her house, Max sat frozen, the pieces falling into place. If Viviana was home, where was Ruby? And why hadn't anyone mentioned it? Questions swirled in his mind, each more troubling than the last. He couldn't confront Viviana now. She'd likely deny everything. Instead, Max drove home, his thoughts spiraling into darker places. This was the 9th day of Ruby's supposed trip, and Viviana was already back. Something was seriously wrong. Max clenched his fists, muttering, "Ruby and I need to have a real conversation." The next day, Ruby finally sent a text, saying she was fine but busy. Max bit back his frustration, replying in a calm tone. By the 11th day, Ruby called. He answered immediately, keeping his voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. "Ruby," he began, carefully controlling his tone. Her reaction was instant and volatile, as though he'd struck a nerve. Her expression shifted to shock and fury. "You want a DNA test?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Max, how could you even suggest that? After everything we've been through, you're accusing me of cheating?" Max had been expecting her anger and held his ground, his arms crossed. "I'm not accusing you, Ruby. I just want clarity. A DNA test will settle everything, so there's no room for doubt." "Doubt?" she repeated, her voice shaking. "You think I've been unfaithful? That's why you're asking for this? Do you even understand how insulting that is? I've been carrying your child, and this is the thanks I get?" Her words stung, but Max didn't waver. "Ruby, listen, I'm not trying to hurt you, but I can't ignore what I've seen. The silence, the odd behavior, Viviana being back earlier than expected. It doesn't add up. I need to know the truth." She stepped closer, pointing a trembling finger at him. "So you've been spying on me? On my friends? That's sick, Max. You're twisting everything in your head." Max took a steadying breath. "I didn't spy on anyone. I reached out to Viviana because I was worried about you. And what I learned doesn't match what you've told me. That's why I'm asking for this test. Not to punish you, but to find the truth." Ruby let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "The truth? You want the truth? Fine. I've been overwhelmed and unwell, and instead of supporting me, you're accusing me of the worst. You've already made up your mind, haven't you?" "No," Max said, his tone firm and rising. "That's why I'm asking for the test. It's the only way to settle this once and for all." Ruby's chest heaved as she stared at him, her eyes glistening with tears of rage or heartbreak. Finally, her voice turned icy. "You want your DNA test? Fine. But when it proves this child is yours, don't expect me to forgive you. Don't expect me to forget that when I needed you most, you didn't trust me." She stormed past him, dragging her suitcase as she vanished down the hall. Max stood still, his heart pounding as her words echoed in his mind. He knew he'd crossed a line, but he couldn't ignore his instincts. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. "Divorce?" Ruby's voice cracked with anguish. "You're accusing me of infidelity and threatening to leave me because I'm pregnant? Max, you've lost it." Max's reply was cold and deliberate. "I've been watching closely, Ruby. You went silent. Viviana lied about being in Europe. And then I saw the video Bonnie posted and deleted. Something happened, and you've been hiding it." Ruby's fists clenched, her anger radiating. "This is insane! You're paranoid, Max! You're imagining things because of your own insecurities." Max's expression hardened as he drew a deep breath. "I'm done playing these games. If this child is mine, I'll be there for them. But I refuse to stay in a marriage without trust." The choice to move forward with the DNA test was final. For a fleeting moment, Ruby's composure wavered. Her expression betrayed a tempest of emotions: rage, unease, and something Max couldn't quite place. When she finally spoke, her voice sliced through the air, sharp with desperation. "This is absolutely preposterous." Her words reverberated across the room as her voice climbed in pitch. "Yes, Viviana came back earlier than planned, but that was entirely my decision. I told her not to tell you because I knew you'd overreact, just like you're doing now." Max stood firm, his arms crossed and his gaze unyielding. "And the video, Ruby? What's your excuse for that?" For a brief moment, Ruby's eyes darted nervously before she straightened her posture, her tone defensive. "For goodness sake, Max, those were just some locals we met at a cafe. They were curious about us and we made small talk. That's all it was." "That's all?" Max echoed, holding up his phone to display a still image. "This doesn't look like a casual chat, Ruby. It doesn't match anything you described about the trip." Her face hardened, and her words dripped with disdain. "You're grasping at straws, Max. You have no proof. You're letting your paranoia get the best of you, afraid of change and responsibility. Instead of confronting that, you're turning me into your scapegoat." Max's jaw tightened, his patience visibly wearing thin. "Don't insult my intelligence, Ruby. You've been dodging my calls, avoiding my questions, and weaving stories. I'm done pretending everything is okay." Ruby threw her arms up, frustration spilling over. "Who even are you, Max? You're acting like a jealous, controlling husband who can't handle his wife having some independence, and now you're accusing me of cheating? You'll regret this." Max's tone was calm but firm, his words deliberate. "What I regret is putting my trust in someone who didn't deserve it. Your lies have poisoned this marriage. We're done, Ruby." For a fleeting moment, her face crumpled, as though his words had struck a chord. But just as quickly, her defiance resurfaced, her eyes blazing with fury. "Divorce?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You're throwing everything away because of your fragile ego? Yes, we've had our fights, but I thought you were stronger than this. I thought you'd rise to the occasion and be a real partner." Max's voice rose for the first time, his frustration evident. "This isn't about stepping up, Ruby. It's about facing reality. Either you're lying to manipulate me or that child isn't mine. Choose." Tears welled in Ruby's eyes, and her voice cracked as she screamed, "You'll regret this, Max. You're destroying everything we've built." She stormed toward the door, dragging her suitcase behind her. Before leaving, she turned back, her voice venomous. "If you don't apologize by tomorrow, you can leave this house. I won't let you jeopardize this pregnancy with your baseless accusations. You have until morning." The door slammed shut, leaving Max alone in the echoing silence of their home. He didn't wait for morning. Tossing a few essentials into a bag, he left. There would be no apology. He wasn't willing to play her games anymore. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of relief. The motel room he checked into was modest, with sparse furniture and a worn bed, but to Max, it felt like a haven, free from the oppressive tension of his house. The stillness was comforting, not stifling. The next morning, Max consulted a lawyer. Seated across from the composed professional, he recounted the tumultuous events of the past few weeks: Ruby's evasive actions, the incriminating video, and her sudden defensive declarations. The lawyer listened attentively, jotting down notes before leaning back in his chair. "It seems like your mind is made up," he observed. "It is," Max replied without hesitation. "There's no fixing this. Our marriage is beyond saving." When Ruby learned about Max's decision to file for divorce, her initial shock quickly transformed into indignation. That evening she called him, her tone sharp and unyielding. "You think you can just walk away? You won't ruin my life, Max. I'll fight you every step of the way." Max's response was cold and resolute. "Fight all you want. This marriage is over and I'll uncover the truth about that child whether you like it or not." Ruby didn't take his words lightly. Over the next few days, she bombarded him with messages, some pleading and tearful. others filled with threats. She turned to their mutual friends, spinning a tale that painted Max as an insecure, controlling husband incapable of embracing fatherhood. Her accusations extended beyond their personal circle. Ruby hinted at pursuing legal action to secure the house, claiming it was for the well-being of her unborn child. Her family and friends rallied to her side, amplifying her narrative. Gossip spread like wildfire, portraying Max as a man running away from responsibility. Even acquaintances began to cast judgmental glances, their whispers laden with suspicion. Despite the mounting pressure, Max stood his ground. To him, the pregnancy felt like a calculated ploy or a consequence of betrayal, and unanswered questions about Ruby's European trip lingered. Yet, the weight of public scrutiny bore heavily on him, turning every day into a battle to protect his reputation. When the case finally went to court, the truth Max had feared was laid bare. Ruby was indeed pregnant. Any lingering hope that this was a misunderstanding dissolved with the medical evidence. But this revelation didn't bring closure. It fueled further conflict. Max's lawyer wasted no time casting doubt on the paternity of the child. They highlighted the gaps in Ruby's timeline, pointing out the limited intimacy in their strained relationship. Prolonged periods of discord and emotional distance bolstered the argument of potential infidelity during her European trip. Ruby's legal team fought back with equal intensity, depicting Max as emotionally absent and unsupportive when his wife needed him most. Ruby's loved ones took the stand, offering vivid testimony that cast Max as a man who shirked his duties and distanced himself emotionally from his wife well before their disastrous European vacation. The witnesses painted him as a husband who rejected fatherhood and ignored his spouse's struggles. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the lawyers battled to shape the narrative. Ruby's legal team framed her as a committed wife betrayed by a partner too self-absorbed to take on the responsibilities of family life. In contrast, Max's portrayal was that of a man distant and unresponsive, failing in his fundamental role as a husband. Through it all, Max sat impassively, his face an unreadable mask even as the accusations piled up. Yet beneath the surface, his resolve burned unwaveringly. He believed the truth was buried beneath a web of falsehoods and vowed to bring it to light. When the DNA results finally arrived, they provided both clarity and anguish for Max. After enduring months of public judgment, whispers, and Ruby's deliberate manipulations, his fears were confirmed. The child wasn't his. Instead of granting closure, the revelation unleashed a storm of frustration and anger within Max. Sitting across from Ruby in her lawyer's office, he watched her pale as she stared at the document in disbelief. "This can't be right," she stammered, pacing the room. "There must be an error. Max, we need another test." Max, his patience stretched to the limit, replied coolly, "Test it as many times as you want. The result won't change. Neither will my decision." Ruby's hands shook as she clung to the paper, her voice breaking. "I don't understand. I was faithful, I swear." Max's tone hardened. "The test doesn't lie, Ruby, but you do." Determined to disprove the results, Ruby demanded a retest. Max, equally resolute, agreed. He needed the confirmation as much as she did, to extinguish any lingering uncertainty. Weeks later, the second set of results arrived, identical to the first. Max was not the father. Ruby crumpled under the weight of undeniable evidence, her sobs echoing in the room as she clung to the documents. "I don't understand," she repeated through tears. "I don't know how this happened. I know the baby is yours." But Max's patience had run out. Gathering his things, he rose from his chair. "It's not," he said firmly, "and I'm done. There's nothing left to discuss." Ruby tried to explain, her words tumbling out in a desperate, chaotic stream. She spoke of muddled timelines and improbable scenarios, but Max remained unmoved. Whatever the cause, the truth was clear. Their marriage was beyond repair. He would no longer be ensnared in her deceit. Shortly after the second test, the divorce was finalized. Walking out of the courtroom for the final time, Max felt an odd combination of freedom and emptiness. The ordeal was over, but the emotional scars ran deep. Ruby's once vocal supporters faded into the background as the truth emerged. Meanwhile, the rumors about Max, once damaging, began to dissipate. Slowly, Max began rebuilding his life with caution. The betrayal had left him guarded, but it also imparted a valuable lesson. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. Ruby's tearful pleas still echoed in his mind at times. "I don't understand," but he felt no pity. Her lack of understanding would be punishment enough. With the divorce settled and the DNA results irrefutable, Max turned his attention to reclaiming his reputation. The lies Ruby and her family had spread tarnished his name, and he was determined to set the record straight. Filing a defamation lawsuit, he presented the DNA evidence as proof of their fabrications. The case sent ripples through Ruby's circle. Her staunch supporters began to distance themselves as the truth unraveled in court. Piece by piece, their falsehoods were exposed. Though the legal battle was arduous, Max ultimately emerged victorious. The court awarded him damages, and Ruby was forced to issue a public apology. 2 years later, Max's life bore little resemblance to the chaos he had endured. He had relocated to a new city, embarked on a fresh career, and even started dating again. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of genuine peace. One sunny afternoon, while running errands, Max stopped at a coffee shop and unexpectedly crossed paths with Bonnie, one of Ruby's former friends. Her discomfort was evident as she greeted him tentatively. "Max," she began, her voice unsteady, "I owe you an apology. There's something I need to tell you." Max raised an eyebrow, both curious and cautious. "An apology? For what?" Bonnie exhaled, glancing nervously around the room. "I should have been honest back then, about Ruby." His expression darkened. "What do you mean?" Bonnie hesitated before confessing. "Ruby had a lover. That trip to Europe, it wasn't just a vacation with the girls. She went with him. Viviana and I knew, but Ruby begged us to stay quiet. We didn't think it was our place." Max's chest tightened, though he kept his composure. "So the entire trip was a lie?" "Yes," Bonnie admitted, guilt etched on her face. "She'd been seeing him for a while. We had no idea she was pregnant. I think she assumed the baby was yours." Vindicated, yet frustrated, Max asked evenly, "Why tell me this now?" Bonnie fidgeted. "Because it's been eating at me. You didn't deserve what happened. I needed to clear my conscience." Max nodded, his emotions simmering beneath the surface. "Thanks for telling me," he said after a pause. "But honestly, I'm not surprised. I've moved on." With that, he left the coffee shop, feeling unburdened. Bonnie's confession didn't cut as deeply as he thought it might. Instead, it reaffirmed what he already knew. Leaving was the right choice. Stepping into the sunlight, Max felt a profound sense of closure. The betrayal that had once defined his life now felt like a distant memory. For the first time, he truly left the past behind, ready to embrace a future entirely of his own making. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.